Welcome to another episode of Steele Creek Explorer. I'm your host, Jeremy Stout, and today I'm hungry. All right, we're over here at the Mill Creek Trailhead, right off Broad Street here in Steele Creek Park. And we've introduced you before to many of the non-native plants and animals that call our region home. Today we're going to look at a few of those and put a little bit different take on it. Today we're going to be looking at common yard greens that are actually edible and in many cases medicinal. All right, well, whenever we talk about foraging for wild edibles, and especially those that are non-native to our area, the first thing that should come to mind is the dandelion. Dandelions, oftentimes I hear folks talk about, oh, dandelion wine. No, the uses of dandelion go way beyond dandelion wine. Hopefully we're all familiar with dandelions. This is a common yard green. This here is the flower of the dandelion. The popular thing that we blow, this right here, is actually the fruit of the dandelion. So instead of having fleshy fruit like an apple, it has this fruit that's adapted into a seed dispersal mechanism. But of course, the plant is more than just the flower and the fruit. Dandelion is also recognizable by these leaves that are sort of sword-shaped or kind of Christmas tree in shape, growing around the base of the flowers or the fruits. Dandelion is entirely edible, from its roots to its tips. You can throw these greens directly into salads. You can cook them as a cooked green. The flowers are edible and are a wonderful addition to salads. And the root was often dried and actually used as a coffee substitute by early settlers to the Americas. And medicinally, it's been shown to be a pretty strong diuretic. It'll actually make you lose water if you drink that dandelion root. The greens have been likened to kale if you like bitter greens. It's not everybody's favorite, but I love them. All right, well, here should be a common yard green to many of us. This might be a common yard nuisance to many of you. And this is not always a plant that people think of as an edible plant, despite its name. But a lot of the confusion and the problem here comes from a little bit of mystery as to what this plant actually is. Many of you at home instantly recognize this as the same thing I called it growing up, wild onion. That's what I always called them. But if you ever ate one of these as an onion, you might have been disappointed. Well, in reality, this plant, even though we might often call it wild onion, its actual name is wild garlic. And that gives a much better hint as to what this plant could be used as. Here are some others I found nearby. When you pull these, this is actually one of the true garlics, and it has an entirely edible bulb that can be used in place of traditional garlic. It's a very similar flavor. It's got its own palate. It's a little bit different, but can be used as a garlic by using the bulb. In addition, the aerial parts of the plant, the parts of the plant that grow above ground, can be used as a substitute for green onions or chives. You can just snip these off at regular intervals and add those to soups or salads or recipes. All right, you don't have to go far. I bet this is a plant that many of you will be familiar with already. No, I'm not talking about the grass. Don't graze on grass. If your mama ever told you not to eat grass, it'll kill your teeth, she was right. Don't eat the grass, but here growing amongst it is something that's not grass. This is a really common non-native plant to our area. Has very recognizable leaves. This is a plant called common plantain. Not to be confused with those banana-like things we call plantains that you find in the store. No, this is a small little plant. Has leaves that resemble spinach. It actually sends up seeds on these tall, skinny stalks. You might be familiar with those if you've ever mowed over them. But this is a great plant to know. Yeah, it's a weed. It's a plant that a lot of people try to get rid of. But this is a plant that is like dandelion. It's edible, both as a raw green or as a cooked green. It has a very spinach-like quality. But it's also a good plant to know medicinally. It can be used as a poultice. You just smush it up between your fingers or chew it in your teeth. It's a plant that's been proven to help alleviate the pain and itch associated with bug bites and bee stings. Like I said, it can be used in place of spinach in any recipe. I will give you fair warning though. It tastes very similar to spinach at first. After you've swallowed it though, it'll actually sometimes come back with a really strange aftertaste. It's kind of started to grow on me, but I do recommend not just eating this as a raw spinach green. Maybe throw it into a salad, cut it with a nice tart vinaigrette dressing or something. It'll really take that strange edge right off. But I love them. Oh no, this is definitely not what we want to find in Steele Creek Park. Oh, bummer. This plant right here is absolutely an edible. We'll talk about that in a minute, but it's also bad news for our local wildlife. I'm going to go ahead and pull this. I'm going to treat this just like we would litter. This is a plant called garlic mustard. As the name would suggest, it is an edible plant. It is a true member of the mustard family, and it gets the name garlic mustard because it does have a very garlicky-like quality to it, especially in the leaves. You can actually just pluck these leaves and throw them directly into a salad or eat them as a raw or cooked green. They don't taste a lot like mustard greens. They actually do taste more like garlic. They're pretty strong. They were used as a salad green, and folks would also use these flowers and the seeds as a spice, as a garlic-like spice once it was dried. It can be eaten as a cooked green, but they say that the garlic flavor, which is the desirable part, cooks away, and all that you're left with is the bitterness. And so not a lot of folks eat it as a cooked green. You can identify this plant when you find it by its strongly toothed, heart-shaped leaves, and when it's blooming, by these flowers with 4 petals, and the petals each are rectangular in shape. It has a pretty unmistakable look to it. But unfortunately, garlic mustard is one of the most detrimental non-native plants we have in our region. This was a plant that was brought here as a food plant. Unfortunately, we've talked a lot about non-native plants. I say just because something's not native doesn't make it bad. Garlic mustard is bad in our region. It's bad for other plants because of something that its roots do. Garlic mustard has allelopathic chemicals. That's a funny word, allelopathy. Basically all that means is it secretes toxins in its roots that are poisonous to the plants that grow around it. So this is a plant that can actually kill its neighbors. A lot of the native plants that should be growing beside it. But it's even more insidious than that. It doesn't just kill its plant neighbors through these allelopathic toxins. It also kills some of our native butterflies. In particular, the West Virginia white. It's a lovely little butterfly. We find it here in Steele Creek Park. Its larva host plant are members of the mustard family. Well, the adult butterflies recognize garlic mustard as a mustard, and so they oftentimes lay their eggs on this plant. But guess what? this plant is not conducive to the growth and development of the West Virginia white caterpillars. So when a butterfly lays its eggs on this plant, the caterpillars don't survive. So it's both toxic to its neighboring native plants and toxic to our native butterflies. So even if you don't want to eat this, if you do learn to identify garlic mustard, pull it wherever you find it and either throw it in the trash as you would litter, or hey, I say it was brought here as food, why don't we just eat this plant into local extinction? Well, we've not even had to go on any of the hiking trails at Steele Creek Park, and we have found a whole meal's worth of edible, non-native plants. All of the ones we found here and shown you today should be easily found and readily available at your own home. I do recommend, of course, before you take any wild edible and before you put that in your mouth or serve it up to your loved ones, make sure that you know what it is you are eating. Safety needs to be the number one most important factor you keep in mind. Make sure that what you're about to eat is something that you know is safe to eat. Don't just take my word for it. Seek out the help of other plant professionals that can help you identify these things. And whether you're looking to add new tastes and flavors to your own kitchen table, or in the case of our garlic mustard here, you're looking to do something good for our local wildlife, get out there and explore your local plant world, and definitely come to Steele Creek Park, because that's where you can be an explorer and dine out. Ah, those were bitter greens.